Good afternoon. Welcome to our roundtable series on the book Don't Look Away. My name is Alejandra Barraza, and I am the president of the HighScope Educational Research Foundation. Today's topic centers around anti-bias social justice education outside of the classroom, a focus on engaging families in pursuing anti-bias practice in the early childhood settings and beyond. The foundation of HighScope began with the monumental Perry Preschool study that started in 1962 in Ypsilanti, Michigan. In the study that included 123 underserved African American children, we were able to see the impact on the effect of high quality early childhood education. After over 50 years of this longitudinal study, which shows the positive effect of high quality early childhood programs on children, we continue to see in our third generation this effect of the Perry participants. At HighScope, as we continue to enhance our wheel of learning, we have added a fifth component in thinking about families, as we know the importance of including their voice in our work. They are, after all, the child's first teacher. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Kenneth Sherman, our Educational and Professional Development Director at HighScope.
Thank you, Dr. Barraza. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kenneth Sherman. I am the Professional Development Director for HighScope and also the Chief Academic Officer here in San Antonio, Texas, where HighScope manages two schools called the San Antonio Hub of Excellence. I've been in the early childhood field for over 30 years, and we know as educators how important it is to engage our families in these conversations. Making our parents feel welcome and our families feel welcome is a part of what we do as early childhood educators. And I'm really excited to be a part of this panel today to be able to moderate some of these important discussions. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists, and then a little bit later on in the presentation, they'll give a little bit more information about themselves. First, we have Portia Cannell, who's from the Buffett Early Childhood Fund in Nebraska. Portia, welcome.
Welcome, thanks.
We also have Sarah Stitt, who is a teacher from San Antonio ISD here in San Antonio, Texas. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Bunny Lash Freeman, who is in Kentucky, who is our vice chair for the HighScope Board of Directors. Bunny,
hello. How are you all?
Thank you. Portia, we'll start with you around some of these important conversations.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Hello, everybody out there. Listen, I want to thank HighScope, Alexandra, and the board for inviting me to this great opportunity to share some thoughts with you about family engagement. Let me tell you what I'm going to do today. I'm going to make some contextual remarks, some opening remarks, then I'm going to briefly summarize the chapter in Don't Look Away that talks about families, the key points. And then I'm going to layer that conversation and introduce for your consideration a definition of family engagement. What are the key characteristics of that family engagement? And we're going to spend a moment reflecting on our mindset as educators. And then we're going to talk about where we are and where we need to go. And then I'm going to end with a quote that I hope you will take into your spirits and your hearts as you finish this webinar and go back to your work with children. So that's what I'm going to do today. And hopefully the words will encourage and support you. So let's begin. First of all, these days, I always begin by acknowledging and bringing into the room the perspective of teachers and educators and others working directly with children and families during these difficult times. Specifically, the impact of the pandemic and the hardship that it has caused families and children and staff and communities especially low income, underserved, and under-resourced communities, the pandemic has shined a bright light on racial inequalities that already existed. I understand that you educators and the families have gone through this pandemic together. While there have been some disruptions in schools, I know for the most part, you have continued to reach out to families and children, and I want you to know that I acknowledge that these are extraordinary times. And I can't do this talk without sharing that perspective and context with you. Next, I want to introduce a quote to you. I want you to hold this quote in your mind, if you could. Here's a quote I want you to embrace. A system of education is not just one thing, nor does it have a single definite object, nor is it a mere matter of schools. Education is that whole system of human training within and without the schoolhouse walls, which molds and develops children. Hold that thought. Can you hold that and reflect on that as I talk for the rest of this presentation? It's a humbling statement as an educator. This comes from W.E. Du Bois. I've adopted, he said it develops men. I changed it to children. I took the liberty to say children. So can you hold that thought for me? It's a humbling kind of thing to know that our teaching interventions will not solve all the problems in the world, that there are many factors beyond the walls that we must consider, which also brings us to the point of the book, which is we have to consider beyond the walls of our center what impacts children's learning, their families, and their communities. So let's hold that thought for me. The second thing I want to say to you is what we all know is that all children are born learning, all children, accent on all. And yet there are racial inequities deeply rooted in all parts of America's educational policy, systems, and practices. Early childhood education is taking a hard look at the role and impact of racism, privilege, discrimination, and the impact it's had on children's growth and learning and education. We're doing that right now. This webinar is all about that. The third thing I want you to know, stay with me now, is that research has shown that factors beyond the wall of the education system have a powerful impact on children's learning and their families. So that if that's a fact, then it would behoove us as educators to pay attention not only to what we're doing within the walls, but without the walls too, if we want to increase the impact of our educational interventions and if we want them to be long-lasting and sustainable. Finally, I want to tell you some good news. The good news is that numerous studies have pointed out the importance of family engagement in supporting children's school readiness and achievement. So the issue is, if we want to increase the power of our educational interventions, we have to embrace families. We have to understand the context, the communities, and other factors that influence children's learning and either support or impair families' ability to support their children's learning. We have to pay attention to all of that. And that could be overwhelming, but don't be overwhelmed. We don't have to do it alone. We have to pull together partnerships, not only within our buildings, but beyond the walls of our schoolhouses, okay? So let's switch gears and let's talk a little bit about Don't Look Away, the chapter about families. It talks about how to help families become advocates for their children's learning. And basically it talks about the 4 E's, and I'm going to briefly summarize those 4 E's for you in my own words. The first E is exploration. What that means is building mutually respectful, goal-oriented relationships with families. understanding the family's hopes and goals for their children. That is the foundation of building partnerships with families. You have to be goal-centered, and you need to understand what their visions and hopes are for their children. Secondly, expectations. We need to hold high expectations for families' role and participation in support of their children's learning and development. We have to view parents as leaders and decision makers for their families and their children and their schools. We have to hold them in high esteem, because after all, after they finish our educational intervention, guess where they're going to be? In their families and in their communities. Thirdly, it talks about education. In this chapter, it talks about how schools need to serve as a place to provide families with opportunities to gain knowledge about how the educational system works. Family needs to understand their role, and they need to understand the importance of early learning, and they need to know their parental rights, and they need to know how to get the support they and their children need from the educational system, and that it is the role of the educator to create opportunities for that to happen for families. Finally, it calls for equipment. What that means for us is that we have to support and provide opportunities for families to develop the skills necessary to navigate the educational system for the next 18 to 20 years that their children will be enrolled in school. Parents have to become equipped to become lifelong education advocates for their children, for their schools, and their communities. And we as educators have a role in creating opportunities so that parents can do just that. Okay? So that's my brief summary of the chapter. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer on to that. I'm going to layer on to that. What I am talking about now is not different. It's just layering on to what the chapter in the book already talks about in terms of family engagement. So let's move to the next slide, which is the definition of family engagement for your acceptance and perusal. I use this a lot in my education work because it's by Hengelsmith, and it's a few years old, but I like it. Would you take a moment to kind of reflect on this? And I'll just speak it out loud. Family engagement is a reciprocal partnership between parents, staff, and programs and schools that reflects a shared responsibility to foster children's development and learning, at home, at school, and are in the community. Can you reflect on that for a moment? I find that this definition mirrors what I think ought to be happening in our educational system. This is a partnership. It is a dynamic process, and education happens in the walls, outside the school, in homes, in the school, and in the community. Hold that thought for me. It's an operational definition. Now, what I want you to look at is the next slide is what I call family engagement relationship. Really, when we say family engagement, guys, what we're talking about is building a relationship with families. It is the development of a respectful, trusting relationship based on partnership that is characterized by these things. I want you to take a look at them, because what we want to do is be concrete. So when you're doing your work with families, you can be asking yourself these questions. Am I culturally responsive? Am I acting in an anti-bias way? Am I linguistically responsive? Am I socioeconomically responsive? Do I have a strength-based orientation? Am I individualizing my approach and relationship with not only the child, but with the family? Or do I have a cookie cutter preconceived notion about families? Am I flexible? Am I open? Is what I'm asking in terms of setting goals for children and families, aligned with what families see for the hopes and goals and aspiration of their children. You need to ask yourself that. Are you doing that? It's a kind of a checklist. Is what I'm doing as an educator aligned to the children's goals and outcomes that I'm working with? And are parents aware of those? Do they understand them? Do they know how the intersection of home and school partnership comes together? And finally, a characteristic of this relationship of family engagement we're building is the equality of family, staff, educator, practitioner roles. We are equal. I'm talking about power. There is no powerful. We are equally sharing the power. And in some instances, I would say that parents have more power because they're the ones that have the most powerful shaping of children's experiences. But we have, am I being in this partnership where I'm sharing power, or am I an expert? You can have different expertise that you bring to the partnership, but it must be shared power. So those are questions that you can be asking yourself. Now, the next slide I want you to take a look at has to do with what I think we're still struggling with in the field. Maybe some of you have made it and you don't have to have this slide, but my position as an educator and a social worker is that family engagement is a interactive, ever continuing partnership that evolves. It is a journey, not a definition. And you may never arrive. You are continually evolving and learning. But part of the thing we've got to do, and I think that's what our book, Don't Look Away, is trying to tell us, is that we need to change our mindset as educators. I know it may be hard, but let's just think with me for a moment. Mindset is defined as a mental attitude or a set of opinions or a particular way of thinking about something or someone. Can we just pause on that for a moment? I think we really have to embrace this. So much of how we were taught as educators puts us in a mindset. And when you add the issues of racial inequity in it, puts us in a mindset of expert, of power. It puts us in a mindset that we have to fight of stereotyping families and children, especially those in underserved communities. We have to fight that on a daily basis. It is a journey. It is not a destination. So I want us to think about mindset. What is my mindset as I'm working to build reciprocal, trusting relationships with families? Next one. Now, I want you to take a look at this. This could be a little checklist for us. I use it myself sometimes. This is about shifting our mindset. Okay, if we're going to shift, what are we shifting from and what are we shifting to? Okay, so this is just a few things for your consideration. As educators, we've got to shift from family engagement as an add-on to our educational work to what? To family engagement as an essential and fundamental component of effective teaching and learning practices for young children and their families. Essential, not an add-on. Not something you do after you finish teaching. It is integrally a part of it if you want to have successful impact on children and families. Family engagement has to be integrated into schools, their programs, their systems, and it has to be driven by outcomes that you have for the child and the family and the families you serve. Okay, we're going to shift to that. We're going to try to be that all the time. So on this column of the two, this is our aspirational destination. You know, it is a journey. We're seeking to get there. We're moving from family involvement to family engagement. Because if we're doing family engagement, then we're building relationships, right? We're not checking off a list of activities. We're building relationships. And what are the characteristics of positive, growing, learning, reciprocal relationships? And that relationship has to recognize parents' importance in their children's learning. Holding power. So we got to talk about the elephant in the room in our educational system, power. We've got to shift that power equation to sharing power with families. We've got to create opportunities in our building of those relationships and partnerships so that parents exercise their power as decision makers for their children's learning, growth, and development. You with me there? We've got to shift from, I'm the expert, I spent 30 years in school doing this work, to, woo, parents are the experts. I have some expertise as an educator that I'm bringing to the table, but my expertise is no more important than the expertise that parents and families are bringing to the table. Together, we will succeed. With my expertise and what they bring, we will succeed in the hopes and dreams and goals for their children. Next, let's focus on learning outcomes for the children. Oh, back again, Sarah, back to the other one, real quick. I'm going to go through this. We have to make sure that whatever we're talking about with families, that children are at the center of that. All families want their children to succeed, their child to succeed. They want to do the right thing for their children. Sometimes they don't know. So our goal is to make sure that every interaction we have with families builds their own capacity to be the best advocate for their child's education, that they learn how to do that on their own through their experiences with us. And finally, we're going to move from doing to, okay, to and for parents to doing with them. We're going to have real partnerships with families where there's an equality of shared expertise and shared power. So just keep that checklist on the back burner, something to go over as you work with the families in your community and in your school. Okay, next slide. I use this as just a visual, okay? Just a visual, because we're shifting from involving, which means you got a checklist of activities that you want to check off for parents to do. We're not doing that anymore. That's not engaging. That's not partnership. We've moved from involvement to engage, which means, oh, I know my families. I'm developing a relationship with them. That mother and father and family know that I know their child and how their child's development is going. And they know that I understand what their hopes and aspirations are for their children. And so therefore, I'm ready to partner with them to achieve the goals and aspirations they have for their children. So this is just a visual, to kind of keep a mindset on, it's a journey, it's a continuum, and we can see that what we're shooting for is partnering with families, not just involving and just not engaging. All is important, but we're aspirationally always want to be working in the partnership model, okay? All right, next slide. All right, so I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I want you to take a look at this team out there, whoever you are, wherever you are. These are some staff-family partnership goals that you might want to think about. It's like, what is the goal of the work I'm doing with my families and in my school and in my community? Well, the first thing is that you need to develop a respectful, reciprocal relationship with these families. You need to honor and recognize their existing knowledge and skills about their children, their hopes, their aspirations, their expertise. You need to be responsible for creating and sustaining a program and school environment that is inviting and welcoming to parents. You need to be able to develop, co-develop with parents activities and learning that promotes children's learning and builds and strengthens the relationship you have with families. Now, there's more to that. The source is Karen Mapp. You can look that up for yourself, but it's just something. I'm trying to give you, layer it on, trying to give you something else to think about as you operationalize this in your day-to-day work and interactions with children and families. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to leave you with this final quote as a provocation. if you can't remember anything else I said today, okay? It boils down to this one thing. Are you with me? Listen, this is from Maya Angelou. I've learned that people forget what you have said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I want you to reflect on that. And when all else, when it's done and said, I want you to be able to say and to know that you have had an interaction with families that has lifted them up, that has affirmed them as the leaders and advocates for their children. And when they walk away from you, they feel good about themselves, their children, and their role as parent, because they're going to take that with them. That is contagious. So with that said, I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Wow, Portia, every time I hear you speak, it's just, I am hanging on to your every word. You have given us some really great nuggets of wisdom. Some of the things that I pulled out is we have to consider beyond the walls of the school and the education system. I couldn't agree more. We've got to think about our families and how we are partnering with our families. I heard you say partnerships. That shared power with the families, not that we as educators have the power and the control, but it's a shared partnership, right? You know, lifelong advocates for their children, just equipping the parents to be lifelong advocates for their children. Shared responsibility again, family engagement relationships, and I think the most important thing that I heard is that we've got to have a shift in our mindset, right? We've got to shift our mindset and have that know that our family engagement as essential, right? It's essential to what we do. Portia, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. I want to shift now to Sarah Stitt, who is in San Antonio, who is with San Antonio ISD. Sarah, let's talk a little bit about some of your family engagement pieces that you've been also talking about with your families.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today because this topic is really important to me. When I think back, when I really reflect on why I became a teacher, something that's central to that answer always is that I really value human connection. And I think there's power in community, and I love people. And I think that's one of the main reasons I became a teacher, is because I just wanted to know more people and have more connections. And, you know, this has been fairly easy, I think, in the classroom when you get to know your kids. You see the kids every day, and it's easy to get to know them, but it's harder to get to know the families. You know, we're all busy, the families are busy, people have jobs. I'm a working mom myself. Lots of times I'm not wanting to bother families, and so it can be more challenging. And so this is my 4th year teaching, and every year I feel like I get stronger at it. Me and my assistant decided early on that first year that we were all overwhelmed with learning this new craft and profession. And we told each other, if nothing else, we get swamped with all this new information. We always just baseline love the kids, just love on the kids and get to know the families. And if we do nothing else, then we're doing a good thing. And so that's really what we've been able to do, is cultivate relationships. We invite parents in to read books on the kids' birthdays. Our parents know that they're always welcome to come in and help out if they want to. But I did over the years have a little bit of trouble trying to come up with specific activities to really bring families in. Because like I said, it's easy to get to know the kids. It's not as easy to get to know the families. And you have all these best laid plans. You know, summertime comes, you have time to read all these books, you have time to go to PDs and these quiet moments in your house, and you think, I'm gonna do it. And then educators out there will know the year starts and you've got deadlines and you've got assessments and you've got, you know, it's best laid plans can get blown out of the water really easily once you hit the ground running with the school year. But I was excited to stumble upon something last year. I had a friend actually post on Facebook, her daughter's pre-K experience. They had a family engagement activity, and I decided to give it a try. And I wanted to share it with you because, not because I think it's the perfect family engagement activity, but because it worked for me, it worked for my families, and it worked for my kids. It was kind of like the perfect storm of things. And so it really took off. And so if you could share the first slide. I think some of you have probably heard of this. It's called a Me Museum. And this was the first one. This was mine. I made one to give an example to everyone. And the idea is you have a little fish tank, kind of like a little museum case, and you put things in there that represent you. And so this was mine. I have a camera in there because I like to take pictures. I have a singing bowl. I like to meditate, drink tea. I'm from Vermont, so I have maple syrup. Reading books, I love to read, and some family photos. So we started this off, and the idea was I had mine out for a week, and I presented it to the kids, and I told them why this represented me. And then they were invited to sign up for a week. They and their families could sign up for their own week. And one of the reasons it was perfect for my busy families was that they didn't have to do all this setting up. They could just put things in a bag and just send it in. And we told them, we'll help them set it up. And I said, if you'd like to come in at any time, we didn't say this day, this time. We said, let us know what time works for you. We'd love to have you come in and help your child present it to the classroom. And so after some, poking and prodding, I think some people were still pretty shy. Even after this open invitation, some people said, didn't want to do it wrong, but we just kept saying, just anything. And so if you could share the next photo, we were sure to take pictures of the kids showing their Me Museum so that we could share with the families to tell them, see, it can be anything, there's no right or wrong to show. And it was so fun throughout the week to see the kids feel so proud of all their displays. They like to show their friends. It was great. There was lots of bonding. They could see what they had in common. And when the parents came in, sometimes the kids were too shy, and so the parents would present themselves. But the kids just loved gathering around and meeting the parents and hearing about their Me Museum. And we go to the next one. And one of the really exciting things was once we kind of found our feet with this, we realized as the parents were coming in, it was a great opportunity to learn about the families and then start talking with them to see if there'd be any way they could sort of expand on an idea and an interest in the classroom if they had time. For instance, this mom, she shared that they like to do their nails together and they do like salon things. And so we were in talks, the pandemic messed this up. She was never able to come in, but she and I decided together that it would be fun if she came in with little kid nail polish that would peel off easily. She was going to come in during a work time and do like a nail salon with the kids. And so we were getting excited about that. But one that we had a similar situation where we latched onto an idea that actually we got to see through to fruition before the pandemic hit. And if you could go to the next slide. So this mom was sharing, and if you can see that little toy drill in there, I think on the left. And when she was sharing, she said, this drill is in here because I like to fix cars, not his dad. I like to fix cars, and he likes to help me fix the cars. And so she and I then got to talking afterwards, and I said, wouldn't it be great if you could come in and show the kids something about fixing cars, not only because it's a skill I don't have, and so I have no expertise in fixing cars, you do, but also, like you said, to showcase to all the kids that girls and boys can both fix cars and be interested in cars. And so she loved that idea too. So she decided to come in one day and show the kids how to change a tire. And so she came in and she brought her car in, she pulled it up to the front, put it on a jack, and the kids came out and sat on the sidewalk and she talked them through how to change a tire from beginning to end. And we liked it so much that we made a little social story out of it that we then kept in our classroom library. And it was called Annie Changes a Tire. And I think they're going to put the link to the social story in the chat if you'd like to take a closer look at the whole story. But it was just a step-by-step of the photos of her doing it and explaining what she did. And so we were able to take out the book once in a while and go over the steps and everything. And it was just a great way. And her son was so proud to have had his mom come in. And this mom was so proud because she oftentimes doubts herself and her role in her child's development. And I'm like her biggest cheerleader because I see her being an amazing advocate and expertise. And so I loved being able to showcase her skills in this way. So like I said, this isn't like the perfect thing for everybody, but it just worked for us. It suited me. I really liked having the kids just have something. It wasn't like I didn't have to cut out a bunch of materials and send stuff home. And they just sent in what they wanted to send. And it was very open and engaging and inviting. So that's what I wanted to share today.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing. What these are so the ideas are great. I really love the idea of a me museum and just having the parents and the children work on those together and just put something that's meaningful to them in there. I think that's a great way to get those important conversations started, right? You know, a lot of times us as educators, we think that we have to stand on our heads. We've got to just twirl around just to kind of get that family engagement happening. But just something simple as bring in things that are important to you and your family. Bring in things that's meaningful to your family. Is a great way to get the parents involved, and also a great way to again get those conversations started. I've been in your room and I've been to the Me Museum that you had last year. And I know that once I came into the room, the children immediately wanted to show me their Me Museum. And it was really great to be able to see that in live. One of the things that you said is that, you know, value that human connection, right? I think that is so important because we want to make sure that we're valuing our parents and the families that we have in our classrooms. Another thing that you said was power in the community, right? That's such a powerful statement, right? Because there is power in community and being able to be a part of the learning community that we have at our schools and with our families, and then cultivating those relationships. So very important for us as educators to remember that we are cultivating those relationships and not just we're the experts in everything, but we are cultivating those relationships. Again, Sarah, thank you so much for your time and being able to expand on some of those things. I want to shift now to Bunny, who is again she's with HighScope as one of the board members. Bunny, tell us some of your thoughts right now.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here and to hear both Portia and Sarah share ideas of things. One of the privileges, the greatest gifts of aging gracefully is the privilege of reflecting back at the evolution of one's personal and professional experiences. Since being on the HighScope board, I realized that I have come full circle from being on staff at HighScope in the 1980s and then taking all of those skills and knowledge on to the National Center for Family Literacy, now the National Center for Families Learning, to apply them to the development of our family engagement framework that was created beginning in 1989. One of the things that was a real gift is that because of my experience at HighScope and the fact that the beliefs that HighScope had as far as how to work with children and families, both based on what Perry Preschool came about, how Perry Preschool came about, and the fact that there was a home visit at the Perry Preschool study, we actually looked at the curriculum and I took all of those wonderful things that I learned at HighScope and brought them to NCFL at the National Center for Families Learning. And I'd like to share with you a couple of things now. So if we could bring up that wheel again, I want to make the link between the two things so that you can see that this is another way of looking at HighScope and the idea of family engagement. If you'll notice the inner parts of the wheel, that very middle section is called active learning. When we talk about it at HighScope, we talk about active learning for young children. And I remember in my early days at HighScope, even before being at HighScope, we talked about materials, manipulation, choice, language by the children, support by the adults. Well, now even that has evolved, and that language and thought is important, but also the adults are scaffolding the kinds of experiences that children are having. Well, in our experience at NCFL, when we looked at family engagement, we realized that there were some things that when we think about children, we think about adults in the same way. You heard Portia talk about being a partner with families. And you also heard her talk about developing knowledge and skills. Well, parents, you don't just do to them, you support them as they are learning as well. And so in the family engagement work that we were doing at NCFL, we supported how parents were learning, and they were learning actively. They were active participants in their learning. And one of the things that you want to include in your family engagement work is an opportunity for parents to have resources where they can choose how they want to learn and how they want to grow. The next thing that is not in the wheel, but is underlying and underpinning belief is that we at HighScope believe in shared decision-making and shared power in the early childhood classroom. So we talk with children about things that are going on and things that are in there. We want them to let us know what they are thinking. The same kinds of things we want to do with them is we want to do the same thing with parents as we begin to look at sharing power and sharing decision-making. You heard Portia talk about the fact that this is not an I am expert as a classroom teacher. You are expert as the parent. We're going to come together and make decisions together as far as parents are concerned. What we want for young children. Also, the plan, do, review sequence is one of those things that we actually took and put into the family learning opportunities for our parents. And then because we did that, we began to look at it as far as goal setting is concerned. So you also heard Portia talk about, let's talk to parents about what are the goals they have for their family and for their children. Plan, do, review does that same thing. And in fact, we took it one step beyond and began to look at what's called one of the core pieces of family engagement as far as we defined it was PAC time, parent and child together time, where parents and children were learning together so that not only did parents support their children learning, but children turned around and supported what parents were learning at the same time. They were laughing and learning and things together. And it set up a power sharing opportunity for the parents and children. So for just as plan, do, review, we set a goal, we work to accomplish that goal, and then we spend some time to reflect on what it is that we have accomplished. We did the same kinds of things with parents in family engagement there. PAC time has now taken its own evolution and included what's called family service learning, so that not only is the family working to learn together, but now they're taking their skills and going into the community to create opportunities for that community to grow and learn. Now think about what that does to the family structure. What does that say about the family? What decisions can families make as they are developing skills this way? The other thing that I want to spend a few minutes on, and it's not a part of the wheel, but it's a part of what the underlying pinnings, and Portia didn't say this, but she said it. And what we talk about is the funds of knowledge. The belief that all parents, all children, all families, multicultural families, multilingual families, all have skills and beliefs and experiences to contribute. So just as Sarah was talking about the Annie and the fact that she was the one who did the drill, and in her family, she was the one who fixed the car. Well, that's a fund of knowledge. Had Sarah not talked with the parent, had not asked her about that drill that was in that museum, she may not have known that it was the mother who was taking that experience as opposed to the father. So these aspects and others defined by the HighScope framework, as described by the wheel that we see, are evolving. And it undergirds everything that we're doing in the area of family and community engagement at HighScope. This book, That Anti-Bias View of Supporting Families, incorporates the very essence of HighScope's beliefs and it's undergirded by the research and the evaluation of programs in this at HighScope. One of the things that we need to think about is, and just recently, the Foundation for Child Development, in their recent document, a statement that they made, I think it came out this week, in fact, where they talked about the research evidence for social justice and early childhood. And I quote, "Little will change for young children and their families and the professionals who support them unless we have the courage to change how we create change through research. Facts must be relevant and understandable to the public, to policymakers, and to practitioners, and they must tell a complete story as a complete story as possible, including lifting up the social justice issues that have long plagued the field of early childhood." So I encourage HighScope to create a research agenda that looks at the curriculum, looks at family engagement, and looks at social justice. Issues tied to race and culture have long been a part of the landscape of America's education system. Given the changing demographics of this nation and in the schools and early childhood, it is essential that early childhood professionals develop the necessary knowledge, skills, and disposition to talk, to teach, and to think across racial and cultural differences. So lastly, I encourage all HighScope professionals, consultants, foundation staff, classroom teachers, administrators to examine their own biases and the impact of our biases, how they have on the families that we serve. I grew up in North Carolina and came to age during the segregated 60s and 70s. I even had to examine my own set of experiences and couple them with my family structure, with my faith, with education, and my willingness to self-examine frequently. We all have biases. However, as we come to know ourselves, we can adjust, change, evolve to be more inclusive and equitable in the work we do with families. So, embracing Don't Look Away and its anti-bias tenets will support your professional and personal work as you recognize and cultivate the promise, the potential, and the possibilities of all families. Remember, all families have strengths and assets.
Thank you, Bonnie. You've given us our charge for this year, and I'm so glad to hear you speak. You are also someone that every time you speak, I'm just listening and just taking in all of this knowledge. And thank you so much. Some of the things that I heard you say is about home visiting, and I know as a teacher, I've been on countless amounts of home visits. And I remember earlier in my career how I felt like, this was just one other thing. But then I started to realize the importance of home visiting and being able to really see the families in their home setting and have them to be relaxed when I'm there. Parents learning actively. That's what we do with the HighScope curriculum, right? We teach about active learning, and we teach teachers how to be active learning teachers. We want parents to be active learning because we know that there's not one way to learn, right? There's several ways of learning, and we want to be celebrate active learning. Parents having resources on how and what they want to learn. I think that is so important. It's really important that we as educators, we ask parents, what do you need from us? How can we be partners in this? I've heard all along about partnerships and thinking about parents as partners and families as partners. And thank you so much just for your rich history of HighScope and working at the foundation as well. So thank you so much. So we're going to do a little Q&A. Let's see, I'm going to, and this can be anyone who would like to answer. And this is one that I'm asking. As you know, COVID has really thrown a curveball to everyone right now, especially with thinking about how our family engagement piece is structured right now, especially when it comes to, you know, some schools are not allowing parents to come into the school systems because of COVID. They're being really proactive with trying to make sure that we minimize the spread. So what can teachers do right now to be able to still engage parents in that parent engagement piece?
I don't mind speaking to that a bit. And none of us are experts, of course, because this is all crazy. But I started off this year continuing on this, wanting to just be totally transparent with my families. I always have been. And I've come to the point where one of the first things I say to my families in the year is, I don't pretend to be perfect, but I do pretend to try as hard as I can and reflect and communicate. Clear communication is really key to me. So my families hear from me all the time. Every time I think they're probably getting sick of me, I hear one of them say they're really grateful because they don't hear a lot from their other teacher and they don't really know what's going on. So I just tell them everything. I tell them my mistakes. I tell them when I'm unsure. I tell them, you know, when I need their help figuring something out. And I tell them they're doing amazing, because that's one of the biggest things this year when I talk to my families is they all think they're failing their kids. They all think their kids are suffering and that they need to be in school or they won't grow. But I've had the pleasure of knowing a lot of my kids returned with me this year. And so some of them that are in person now, I've been able to see them after a long break. And I've been able to tell the parents, they've grown so much. They've grown so much. You did that. You know, so a lot of my work this year has been just pouring that, you know, giving the parents props and letting them know they deserve it and that they're doing everything they can and that it's not just good enough, that it's great. So that's just support.
If I could jump in. Hi, I'll introduce myself in a minute, but one of the lessons from observing San Antonio and the virtual learning that took shape was that your children and your families were also invited into your home, into the teacher's home in that virtual environment. And kind of calling that out and empowering the moment relative to that, I think is also important, because we're all family members in addition to being teachers, directors, etc.
Where I am here in Kentucky, several teachers, early childhood teachers, have taken materials to the families and do what's called porch visits, where they will drop off materials for the children, because one of the things they wanted to make sure that they did was to allow for active learning to happen in the home. And sometimes parents don't have the same kinds of materials that we have in the early childhood classroom. So I would encourage teachers to talk with the parents when they're online with the children, and then do a porch visit or just reach out to them in a variety of ways. One of the other things that happens is that my own grandchildren are doing virtual learning in California. And one of the things that the teacher does there is they actually bring things to the home as well. And then they set up opportunities for the parents to pop in. 5 minutes, how are they doing? What's going on? And she does that on a monthly basis, where the parents have an opportunity to ask any questions online while the children are online right there.
Thank you, Bonnie. We have time for one more quick question. I want to send this one over to Portia. So one of the questions was, what do you think are the key tools parents need to know to be lifelong advocates for their children?
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? You know, this is going to sound like I'm answering a question with a question, but I really have seen this operate so many times, and that is parents become lifelong advocates for their children when they know that how much they matter in the education of their children. When they get the in their heart and spirit that I am a key player in my child's education, and they see the results of that. And it takes a skillful educator. It's easy to tell. It's harder to design a set of interactions with a parent that leads them to see their own power as an educator of their child. If you can design 2 or 3 of those moments, I've observed them, I've been a part of them, something internal changes for parents. I mean, we always say we recognize parents, but the question is, can you as an educator create a set of activities and experiences for parents that lead them to believe internally that they matter most in their children's education? It's easy to design activities, it's easy to tell parents what to do, but to think together as educators, how can I have an interaction or engage a parent in something with me, her, and her child, or his child, whatever, that the parent experiences? And I've seen this done at our center. I've even seen it done virtually. And then suddenly you'll look at a parent and a light goes on. Wait a minute. You mean I matter? Especially those of us who are working in marginalized communities where parents give into the power of us and they don't know, they've got all these messages that they don't matter. But if you can do that, and I know as educators, if you can think of how to build up children's learning and development, you can figure out how to help his or her parent participate. And it doesn't have to be a big activity, but it has to be designed in a way that that parent is an active participant, and the parent has a way to observe their children's reaction as you perhaps narrate the activity. If that happens, a light goes on. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It has to be like 25 steps. Just 1 or 2 of those things, then I've seen parents' countenance change. They're like, oh, I feel competent, capable. I do stuff that makes that child learn. And it has to be an active participation, interactive, not do you read to your child at night? I mean, that's wonderful. They should read to their children. But I'm talking about engaging parents. I'm talking about racking your brain as educators and say, okay, I know about, I think Ms. Jones can do it. How can you create simple 1 or 2 activities to have her actively participate in and observe and narrate for her? And the conclusion is, oh, I matter. I made my child recognize me as the person they learned something from. That is, I mean, irresponsible. And that is irreplaceable. And we can get into, it's not a cookie cutter thing. It depends on the context, the families, the issue, the teachers, what's available, the system. So, but I know from working in the Educare Learning Network of 25 schools in 15 different states that it can be done. And you are in hundreds of places. I know you do it already, but it takes a different mindset.
Kenneth.
Thank you, Portia.
So, hello, everyone. I think if we can pull up the final slides, I want to give a giant thank you to the panelists today for making this a rich hour. Thank you to the 700 of you that attended and provided insights and questions, some yet to be answered. I wanted to highlight for you, and I know that Ingrid and Katie have been pushing this out in the chat, that sorry. I've got some feedback, so Katie, hopefully you can help with that. All of the participants will receive an email and a certificate of attendance. There have been lots of questions from people who weren't able to attend the previous sessions. They are all on the Roundtable website. which you can see right there in front of you on the YouTube channel and beyond. I'm so proud of these sessions, so proud of the board for supporting them, for the staff that has jumped in from the foundation and have also been experts on each of the roundtable sessions. There's 3 more to come. Here's the website. 3 more to come. The next on the 3rd Wednesday at 2 o'clock on February, March, and April. February's session will be on assessment. You can register today, early childhood assessment, and making sure that that is an informative process that helps us identify disparities and doesn't create disparities. Then the March session will be around the workforce. And then the final session, hopefully, will be an ongoing discussion with the 4 authors of Don't Look Away. We'll engage them in a very provocative discussion, I think. April was when Don't Look Away was published in 2020 to April 2021 it's been an amazing year. A lot of water under the bridge in terms of both practice, policy, and national and world landscape in it. So I hope you will join us for all of these remaining sessions, and urge you to continue to engage with HighScope, consider investing in HighScope, and for all of the HighScope community that has been on this session today, a big thank you for the learning that you have contributed to, the research that you have contributed to, and the knowledge and competencies that will be increased in our coming future as a result of all of this. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. I learned so much from you today.